Hi, it's Milton Kane. I'm the Christian Democratic Party candidate for the federal seat of Newcastle. Today I'd like to talk to you about the problems that we're facing through information we're seeing regarding Syria. You see, we need to really look at where, how, why all these events took place. And to go back into a little bit of history, we need to understand what actually happens in that part of the world. Many years ago, the Lebanese people was effectively governed by, I suppose, a substantially Christian parliament. There was significant Christian control there. There was a Muslim minority group. Now, there was a bit of conflict between the Christian and the Muslim political parties. That wasn't really causing huge issues. It was some minor flare-ups from time to time. The problem was that, you see, the Lebanese Christian phalange, as they refer to them, were somewhat friendly towards Israel. And that did get up the nose of so many of the Muslims around. Now, right next door to Lebanon, you have Syria. Now, Syria, in her battles with Israel, was unable to successfully defeat the Israelis, and so she, like all other nations, had divided off some sectors of her military establishment to form a part of I suppose, what we would refer to as a terrorist standing army. And a part of that essentially was the Hezbollah. And basically what happened is the Hezbollah particularly entered into the Bekaa Valley, and they were obviously involved in helping the Muslims to the north, and obviously coming around in the Bekaa Valley towards the Israeli border and trying to herd off or cut off the Christian phalange from their Israeli friends. That particular civil war, as it was called, was not really a civil war. It was sort of like a civil war, but it was assisted by huge amounts of Hezbollah being brought into Lebanon from Syria. And basically the Syrian government ended up assisting the Lebanese of brokering a peace deal. And that peace deal essentially was you hand over the government to the Hezbollah, because basically now, well, they've got control of the place, and so that's essentially what happened. Now we move on. We've had the relative, I suppose, good relations between Lebanon and Syria now, because after all they've got their puppet in power in Lebanon. Now, we have some people in Syria not very happy with the administration, and so they start some protests. And very often in the Arab world, when you have a protest, it does mean a bit of violence. And that's essentially what happened. And these people were opportunistic, and they were deciding to attack government facilities. Then we suddenly find that these group of people are being joined by another group of people. And they happen to be the Muslim Brotherhood, coming fully funded, fully trained, all the way from Iran. Now, this Muslim Brotherhood are the same sorts of group that actually took over Egypt. Now, this Muslim Brotherhood come in and permeated itself throughout the people in Syria that were opposed to the government forces, and basically have now substantially taken charge of the resistance against Syria, the Syrian government. Now, a failure to understand this would actually mean that somebody would decide to take sides. Now, what's actually happened in recent days is that there has been some suggestion that they can establish the fact that the Syrians have in fact used some of their dirty, dirty equipment. They're using chemical warfare, into the chemical warfare area. Now, it would be conceivable that could be the case. They do have, I believe, I haven't seen it, but I do believe they have a stockpile of chemical munitions. Now, some of these chemical munitions could easily have fallen into the hands of the Muslim Brotherhood. And it's quite possible that the Muslim Brotherhood could have bought from Iran such equipment. So much of the Arab world is about the way you govern, is that you have your mates and you oppress the others who aren't your mates. And that's essentially the system of government that happens in pretty much all of the Muslim world. Now, having said that, we have this, now the Muslim Brotherhood basically confronting the Syrian armed forces. And of course the Syrian armed forces seem to be at somewhere between a stalemate and potentially losing ground. So what we now have, we have a situation where the United States has convinced itself that the Syrians are using chemical warfare, and they did put a red line in the sand. If you're using chemical munitions, then we're going to come in and intervene. So we're at the point where potentially the United States is going to intervene on the side of the rebels, as it's so called. Now, these rebels, as I say, very much today, substantially people from the Muslim Brotherhood, and of course they actually don't believe in democracy. The newspapers actually report this as being a democratic uprising. That, I'm sorry, is a very poor interpretation of the facts. Now, the problem we have is whether or not we should back one side or the other. That's the real issue, what we should do about it. Israel, on the other hand, is sitting there waiting, ready and willing to act, not because she wants to, but because there's no way that Israel wants to be having collateral damage from this particular conflict affecting her northern borders with southern Syria. Now, there has been a few warnings given, and there's been a few Israeli strikes within Syria at this stage. So the war in itself is fairly complicated, and yet we seem to have the United States, and unfortunately it may seem that we may follow the suit of the United States. We may follow exactly what they do and actually become involved in this conflict. My concern is the fact that we may be choosing to back the wrong people. I don't know whether it is wise to get involved. Personally, I probably think it's not. I think it's probably wise to try and do our best to stop the supply of weapons. I think it's probably the best thing we can do is to try and stop the supply of military personnel to the particular situation. Now, you see, one of the good positions that we have here is we have the situation where we've got the Hezbollah in Lebanon that are actually coming to the aid of their former, masters in Syria, and helping the Syrian government. Now, all these things are fine, I suppose, if that's what we like to see. But one of the difficulties is that because of the way things happen in that part of the world, how you're governed by fear and you oppress people if they are not on your side, that system does not bring about democratic change. It doesn't bring about much more. All it brings out is a person who is the strong man, who is capable of being able to oppress others. And if we get rid of the current leadership in Syria, we'll end up with a different strongman, probably supporting a different grouping. And if that grouping happens to be the Muslim Brotherhood, then we have the expansion plan of Iran being put into place, another section of her expansion demands. You see, I spent some time over in that area, and one of the things that I found was when I found the maps of Greater Iran, Greater Syria, Greater Lebanon, Greater Iraq, that explained to me a lot about the conflict, because each and every one of those nations, when they have their greater borders, they refer to their neighbours as being a part of their own country. That's one of the problems, is that essentially these people do not directly recognise the sovereignty of borders of their neighbouring countries, which is a part of the reason why we have this continual coming together of these despot regimes to attack the state of Israel from time to time. Now, putting all of that together, I wonder about the wisdom of the Australian Defence Forces, the Australian political leadership, even considering for a moment to be involved in such a conflict. I think that the problem is that when we make statements like the United States have made, may put you in a position where you feel obligated to act in a certain way. But I suggest to you that that would probably be very unwise, because until you understand the facts and who's actually involved and what their whole position is and what the plan is, then it's very hard to determine who is in the right and who is in the wrong. And sometimes we will come to the conclusion that both sides are in the wrong, and we need to be careful about that one. What we need to be reminded of, very much so, is that the United States has had a history of involvement in various places in the Middle East. And sometimes what we've done is we've armed a group which have become the enemy at a later date. And that's one of the problems, is because the people there tend not to have loyalty and the dignity of others as being a strong part of their culture. Then basically they will take advantage of anything that's on the table. If it's in their best interest to get some weapons from you, they will say what they want. Because after all, it is one of the, strong statements of Islam that it is absolutely okay to lie to the infidel to gain an advantage over the infidel. And so we need to be reminded of this, and I think it would be very important for the government to think very long and careful before it commits Australian troops, Australian personnel to any action in regard to this particular conflict. Personally, I think that what I would do is try and stop others from inflaming it, and personally stay well and truly out of it, and allow them to continue what they wish to do, because at the end of the day, there's nothing anybody can do to stop these people who do not respect life, do not respect limb, do not respect each other, from actually coming around and actually killing each other. If we get in the way, essentially what it will mean is some of our people will needlessly die as well. I hope you will support me in requesting of our government to be very mindful of all of this before any decision is made in reference to any action or any response to the events occurring in Syria today. Thank you.